see you. I've got a quick story to tell you. As a young kid growing up in the UK, one of the first albums I bought with my own money was Wild Eyed. You know, the one that's just going to be released.
Yeah, right.
As a young boy, I was attracted by the artwork. It was.
Let me tell you a story about that. You know, and you probably heard this story a lot from various musicians and bands, but very few bands are ever happy with their album covers and their artwork, and we always try to interject our artistic talents and feelings and whatever. And so every time we get something, it's like the scene in Spinal Tap where it's, you know, well, it's the glossy, you know, and that we were in the studio and that record, the artwork came through and we went, oh gosh, I said, here we are making a bit of a conscious effort to get away from the traditional redneck Southern labeling of bands. And we were still very proud to be a Southern band, but we felt that we had moved on. Well, now here's this album cover and there's a pickup truck and a crushed beer can and a saloon and the girl in the hot pants. And we're just going, man. Well, little did we know, there was an article, I can't remember what publication, after the record came out, and they figured that the album cover alone was worth $250,000 records just from these kids such as yourself going through I gotta get this, you know, this is brilliant. So yeah, things work out in unusual ways.
They do. I mean, it's a fantastic couple of albums. The band had already obviously been around for a while by then. How important were these two albums?
How important were what? I'm sorry.
These two albums that are now being released by Snakefarm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as the reissues, I don't know. You know, other than paying homage to something that you're proud of, that it was kind of the real mark of success, or you know, or going in the right direction for the band. Because prior to that, we had three records, three albums that came out. First one being in 1977, late 76 maybe. Anyway, and those first two albums were tragically unsuccessful. We learned a lot. We worked with Dan Hartman as a producer. Dan was the bass player in the Edgar Winter Group. Yeah. Phenomenal musician, and we really learned a lot. But quite frankly, the band was still pretty green, and we were trying to be everything that had already been done before us, you know, be it the Allman Brothers and Skinner and Marshall Tucker and Charlie Daniels. And we're just all of a sudden one day said, wait a minute, that's already been done, and it's been done by the best, and we're just trying to emulate it. We need to do something quite different. So the third record that had our first top 40 single, which was had Rockin' Into the Night on it, we made some changes, came back down south, worked with Rodney Mills at Studio One, who had a track record as an engineer with the Atlanta Rhythm Section. And we were able to hook up with Jim Peterick, who was in the band Survivor at the time, and we came up with a real corker of a song that put us on the radio. And that kept us, let's say, if you will, employed. And at that point in time, then it was like, well, what do we do next? Well, we just carry on. And the real turning point, I think, is we took the blinders off, Mark, musically, and started listening to a wide spectrum of music. And the Cars were a big influence, believe it or not, on the band. And I remember the first time hearing Just What I Needed on the radio. And oh my gosh, I hated it. I couldn't change the channel fast enough. I was like, what is this? And after about a week or so, I found myself singing along with it. And of course, the Cars were brilliant, doing very simplistic types of rhythms, eighth note rhythms, and just chunking along. And it was like, there's something there. So that led to me sitting around watching TV one day and go dun 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 dun, walking down And there you have the initial riff for Hold On Loosely.
Yeah.
Don Barnes had a brilliant title with that, Hold On Loosely, but don't let go. If you cling too tightly, you might lose control. And it was a message to his wife at the time, the relationship they were having. And then entered Jim Peter again, who we had some success with, and all the stars and planets lined up. And we knew it was a good song, but you never know until it comes out and then it's on the radio, and it's going up the charts. So that record, that was the real turning point, because we went from selling a 20,000, 30,000, $250,000 to double platinum.
Yeah.
And then followed that up, of course, with the other reissue, which was Special Forces, that had our first top 10 single with Caught Up in You. So that was, we finally developed a style, a trademark style that people could recognize as us. And yeah, we were lucky.
Yeah, I mean, it's two absolutely fantastic albums. I remember getting them both. I sort of like lived with them for most of my life, which is a fantastic thing. But unlike a lot of stuff you buy when you're a kid, they've never actually got old for me. I've like always loved to revisit them over the years. And that the thing with Jim and Rodney, I mean, it was like a magical combination that produced some wonderful music. How did things change with when the hits started coming for the band as far as tours went?
Well, it was a gradual evolution. I mean, we went from playing clubs to playing your 2,000 seat venue to playing your 5,000 seat venue. And then, of course, the band's going, hey, time to headline, let's go. And our manager, Mark Spector at the time, said, well, now calm down. We need to do this gradually. And you don't want to go too quickly and get into a 20,000 seat arena and do a half house. Obviously not good business. So yeah, so it was a gradual evolution. Quite frankly, the whole tour, with the exception of a few dates here and there in small venues, but the whole Wild Eyed Southern Boys tour in '81 was as a support act, in this case with the Jefferson Starship. We at that point in time had become the support act in the country. Everybody wanted to have us because we were selling records and what have you. So we did the majority of that year with the Starship, which was a wonderful tour, sold out everywhere. Became very good friends with all those folks. Craig Chiquiso is a great guitar player, and of course Mickey Thomas and I are still good friends. And it was a good learning curve as well. And we carried that on into Special Forces, doing some more dates with them, headlining a few more, but it really wasn't until, I would say, until Tour de Force, which was the record after Special Forces, that we became a legitimate headliner and doing arenas and sheds and what have you. And at that point in time, our opening acts were Huey Lewis and the News in 1984, and in 1986, some band, Bon Jovi, I think was their name.
Yeah, tiny little band.
Yeah, tiny little band. So yeah, so it was a gradual process, and a great run, and wonderful to hang with so many other great musicians and learn from them. That was the best part of it. People say, was there anybody that you didn't like? It's like, you can count that on one. Most everybody was great, and there was the one, but that's for another time.
Yeah, we'll forget about that one for now. The Snakefarm Records Reskinned series, which see these two albums being released, presumably that's going to be an ongoing thing. Will there be more?
Well, I think there will be. I actually just got an email the other day from I think Dante Benuto was his name, who is behind. And first of all, I have to say I was so impressed when I received the records that the liner notes had been updated to basically follow the chronology of the band and bring the history up to date on what happened in the meantime. That was extremely well done, as opposed to just printing the liner notes as they were in 1981 or 1982. So that was very good. It put a fresh twist on the whole thing. And anyway, he contacted me and said we're thinking about doing some more and carrying on the other albums, subsequent records, and do re-release. I said, absolutely. And he said, would you be interested? And I said, well, yeah, let me know which ones so I can put my thinking cap back on and go back in time and help with some of the liner notes, or as far as the history of the band and anything that might be unique for those records. So that'd be terrific. That'd be wonderful if they did that.
Yeah.
Because
it would. I mean, my old vinyl's getting a bit worn out now. Thankfully, we had CDs. So I've actually got the two on it, like one of those double CD packs as well that you can get, the fat packs. The two albums were released some years ago.
Are the CDs colored?
No, just standard. So this was a previous release, though. One of the questions I always like to ask people is where it all began for them. What made you pick up that guitar in the first place?
I hated the accordion.
Good answer.
Well, actually, my first instrument technically was an accordion. And the way that happened is my parents, who gave me every opportunity to nurture my interest and talents or whatever, but they suggested, because my cousins played piano, so we'd like to play piano. So yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I was probably 9 years old at the time. So they took me to a teacher expecting that we were going to get piano lessons. And the first thing the instructor said was, don't waste your money buying a piano. And my dad says, what are we supposed to do? And he goes, well, if you do, and he loses interest, you're stuck with an expensive piece of firewood. So she reaches down behind her desk and goes, here, you rent this from me. And open it up, and it was an accordion. Wow. So I'm going, well, that's novel. So I took it home. Now, mind you, 9 years old, accordions are heavy. If you've ever picked one up, it could be 25 pounds. And you've got, straps and whatever. It's almost like, blasting into space, getting ready for one of these things. And then you have to, of course, pump it, and you've got the keyboard, which is one thing, but then you've got all these buttons. What do these things do? Make a long story a little bit longer. I went home, and I would come home from school, and obviously, instead of doing my lessons, running scales or what have you, whatever she gave me, I would put cartoons on, and I would learn theme songs by ear. And would come back the next week, and she says, okay, show me what you learned. And I play Popeye the Sailor Man. And she'd yell and scream, and no, you're supposed to go da 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 da. Doing. I said, yeah, but check this out. And so she goes, no, go home and do your lesson. So the next time I'd come back with a stash of new cartoon themes. And after, I'd say maybe a month at the most, Mark, I just said, this is a deal breaker, and I can't do it. And that's it. My parents said, all right, fine. So then, as you've heard many, many times, and this certainly isn't the first time, February 9th, 1964, seeing the Beatles. And for me, the thing that struck me, it wasn't the screaming fans, it wasn't the hair, it was the look and sound of an electric guitar. Literally, it was like, what are those? And listen to the sound they're making. Listen to the noise they're making. This is just fantastic. So, I went to my dad and said, I'd like to play guitar. And he said, well, just like you wanted to play piano. I said, no, not accordion. He goes, well, you got me on a technicality. He goes, yeah, you're right. I'll get you a guitar. So, and I still have it. It was just a little $10 black, it didn't even have a name on it, just a black acoustic guitar. I think there's 5 strings left on it, but I still have it. And I wouldn't put it down. I mean, I went to bed with it. I got up, and I just played it and played it and played it. And as they say, then the rest is history.
Yeah. It's an incredible story, and it is incredible to hear how many people the Beatles touched in that way, especially in the US. When I'm speaking to a lot of American musicians, that was a real incredible moment in history that spawned so many bands. It's hard to imagine these days any band being able to touch people like that, but
Well, it really is, and the thing is, as I've gotten to know so many musicians over my life, um, everybody's story is slightly different, or there's a different twist. Liberty DeVito, who was Billy Joel's drummer for
yeah,
30 odd years, he and I are very close, and we do a lot of work together. Well, he's a Ringo's. He he explained to me why Ringo was one of the greatest drummers ever. I mean, I could tell you about guitars and stuff, but it really, and he would do the same thing with other drummers. Mitch Mitchell, he says, listen to what he's doing, with Hendrix, and it's like it all made so much sense. But anybody that you talk to, that penultimate moment when they discovered the Beatles and how it struck them initially, it's different for everybody. The outcome's the same, but it's like there's some other little bit of magic that happened, and we're able to still share it, as you said. How many years later? 50
God, 50 odd.
something.
Yeah, 50.
Yeah. Have you seen? This is a tangent. McCartney 321.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it?
It's
Yeah,
wonderful. I
yeah,
just saw it last week, and then I watched it again and again and again. Uh,
yeah.
and that parts of that took me back to that magic, seeing them for the first time, just the way. And he was so humble and candid in it. He became real. He became like you,
Mm.
um, just a bit more genius on top, I guess.
Yes, yes. He's certainly a better songwriter, maybe even a better singer and bass guitarist than I. But yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. Growing up in Jacksonville as well must have been interesting at the time when you did.
Yeah, I ended up in Jack. I'm actually from, my family's from Boston.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's go back further, Sicily. Uh, and so after just before World War II, the boat came over, brought my grandmother and grandfather. My mother was 9 years old at the time, and after the war, she met my dad, who was a fighter pilot in the Navy, and he was also um, Sicilian. So uh, it, after the war, he stayed in the Navy. He loved flying airplanes, and we got transferred here, there, and everywhere, and ended up in Jacksonville right about the time I started playing accordion. I was probably, what, 62, I guess, 61 or 62. And uh, so you grow up, and just like everybody else, you meet kids at school or whatever. Well, if you can just picture, you could put a net over on my neighborhood. There was 2 streets over Billy Powell, who was a keyboardist in Skinner, and he and I were in Cub Scouts together before we either one of us ever played a musical instrument. His brother and I are still very good friends. Alan Collins, um, one of my dearest friends and one of the greatest guitar players I've ever heard to this day, lived 4 streets down. Leon Wilkeson, 2 streets the other way. It was this, and you back then you had a choice. You didn't have much of a choice. You went outside and you hit a ball with a stick, or you played music. And you didn't have all the diversions, be it computers or cell phones or video games or whatever, to distract you. And so the community of musicians, um, really was very accessible. And there were places that we could play. There were teen clubs, there were youth centers. It wasn't just bottle clubs or places that served liquor where you couldn't get in. Now, on the other side of town, not very far away, were the Van Zants and Gary Rossington, Larry Johnstrom, and then a whole plethora of other players that were in other bands that intermingled with us. And we all played the same places. We all knew each other. We were all competitive with each other, but we were all friends. So that was the scene. And people say, well, why did so many bands come out of Jacksonville? I don't really know the answer, other than there were opportunities for us to play when we were very young, and then even later on, there were 3 military bases, major military bases in Jacksonville, all naval bases, and they needed entertainment. They had the enlisted men's club and whatever, so we would get. My father actually booked us for some shows when I was in a band prior to 38 Special. It was a forerunner to 38 Special. And yeah, we played those places. We had the opportunity. And then I remember Skinnerd. Well, first of all, I guess prior to Skinnerd, we witnessed the Allman Brothers forming.
Yeah.
I mean, we were there. I would go to a music store on a Saturday afternoon and be standing next to Duane Allman. And he's checking out guitars and talking to him or whatever. Not that we were best friends, but it was that kind of community. And they would play these free outdoor concerts. He showed up in Jacksonville. He and Greg were living in Daytona Beach. They were from, I think, Nashville, but his mother moved him to Daytona. And then, of course, they went to California with the Hourglass and whatever. And then Duane said, I've had enough of this. I'm going to Muscle Shoals, and he became a session player. He came to Jacksonville. We knew his reputation because of the Hourglass and the Allman Joys and what have you. But there were these, they called them B-ins, which were basically a place where you could go hear them play for free, and all the hippies would show up and, keep a lookout for the cops while you were smoking, and then JMO showed up. And this was centered around the Second Coming, which was Dickie Betts's band. So it was Dickie Betts, Barry Oakley, Larry Reinhardt, who was the other guitar player, Reese Winans, so there's Duane jamming with them. We'll go, wow, this is cool. Check out the blues. And then JMO. And all of a sudden, Greg shows up one day, and the next thing you know, they're the Allman Brothers band, and they're playing around Jacksonville. But then they left and then moved to Macon. So we saw. The point is, we saw that come together, and we saw how good you could be. They were ferocious. If you saw that band, the original band with Duane, it was frightening how good they were. And the same thing I'll have to say the same thing about Leonard Skinner. And it has nothing to do whether it's your cup of tea with music. It's just the way they played, the conviction that they had, and the way they played and how they approached their instruments. Just, it was good education. But we saw that they could do it, or Skinner did, and then they left. And I was in college at the time in Atlanta, and they were coming up, and that's when Al Cooper discovered them. And they did their first record at Studio One. And we said, well, they can do it too. And so it just gave you inspiration to say, well, if they can do it, we can sure try. Yeah. Not the easiest thing in the world, but so that's kind of how it evolved. And there were other bands out of Jacksonville that did the same thing, or Florida bands anyway. The Outlaws, who were from Tampa. Molly Hatchet was from Jacksonville. So yeah, it was, but we had the opportunity to learn our craft by playing a lot at a young age. And so when we got to that point, 19, 20 years old, and even then you go in the studio to record, we're a perfect example, still very green and not very good. It takes a while to get it together. But that was the Jacksonville scene. And when you look back, it's amazing how many bands came out of it.
It's incredible. I mean, it was like a magical place when I was a kid, when you just read about it. But over the years, with the internet and the resources that are out there now, you realize what a sort of like epicenter for music, and how inspiring it must have been to so many people. It's Yeah, I mean, and fantastic bands. I mean, I put 38 Special in with Skinnerd and the Almonds, and for me, they were the band that were around when I started really listening to
Sure.
music.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it was any different in say, for example, San Francisco, the Bay Area. But, you
Yeah,
had the Grateful Dead, you had the Airplane, you had Quicksilver, you had a lot of bands, and maybe their community was have the same story
mm.
as what was going on in Jacksonville, but in a different way. But that's that's the way it worked for us.
You mentioned the Cars, which was something I'd heard before, but there must have been so many other influences in those early days that I mean, obviously the local influences is one that we've touched on, but what else were you listening to when 38 Special came around?
Well, interesting because as we were forget about or prior to 38 Special, as we're all in our various bands growing up, it's like anybody else. You listen to the Beatles and then you said, oh man, I'm a Stones fan. And then you listen to the Stones. And then you get a hint of uh, the blues and guitar playing, and it's like the Yardbirds or the Kinks and the British Invasion. Then all of a sudden there's the soul music. And you could have been a Motown fan. You could have been more of a Stax, Folk, Muscle Shoals type soul. It's all this stuff. Probably the first for a guitar player. Jimi Hendrix came out, and it was phenomenal. But he was so good. I think he scared us. Most guitar players to this day say, I didn't really get Hendrix. That's because you couldn't, you couldn't play it. You couldn't even imagine it. But and then Cream, of course, for Skinnerd and for us, Cream was just unbelievable. But as that evolved, then there were bands like Mountain that was a huge influence on us. Creedence,
Yeah,
in the early 70s or 1970, for example, one of the biggest influences, and this is another story I'll tell you, Free. And I did a show with Paul Rogers a while back. I was very excited about it. I'd not met him with 38 in '86. Bad Company, when they came back with Brian Howe as the vocalist, we toured together, and I became friends with Simon and Mick and what have you, but I'd never met Paul. So I did the show with Paul, and I was so excited. I was like a kid in a candy store, and I brought the sleeves of my vinyl records with me. The show was in Las Vegas for him to sign it.
you did the same as I did, remember?
Well, at the sound check, I said, yeah. I said, would you sign these for me? And the record that really meant a lot to me was the very first Free record. It's called Tons of Sobs.
Sobs, yeah.
Yeah, and the first one of the songs on it that I heard Skinnerd play for the first time was "Walking My Shadow," and I was probably 16 years old, maybe 17. Walked into a teen club, they played it, and I said, went to Ronnie, I said, did you guys just write that? He goes, no, that's this band called Free. So next thing you know, so Paul looked at me when he saw the album cover. He said, how do you know about Free? I mean, he was really like taken aback by it. And he said, I could understand if it was after All Right Now or Fire and Water, or that any of the albums that had All Right Now on it or after that. But hardly anybody in the UK knew about us at that point in time. I said, no, I said, you have to understand this was our education. That's why we ended up growing up, maturing, and playing the way we do, because that was part of our schooling. Listening to Kossoff, singers listening to you. We really grabbed hold of that. He said, wow, he said, I never thought about it like that. And I thought that was interesting. because he just didn't think it mattered that much. And I said it was huge for us. One band I have to say, and country music was a big influence on, and I'm speaking really for guitar players, guys like Jerry Reed, who is still one of my all-time heroes. Just his technique and his skills were beyond beyond surreal. And learned a lot from those guys because we were surrounded by country players. I played pedal steel for a while just because I was fascinated with the instrument. Never got very good, but liked it. One of the biggest turning point for me as a guitar player, as far as hearing somebody that really influenced my style, and people go, "What?" It was Queen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they go, "You don't sound anything like Brian May." I said, "Well, of course I don't." I said, I'm not supposed to. I don't want to. That's what Bry, as he says, as he calls himself, does, and does it quite well. So what it was I'd never heard a guitar player play that melodically and follow up what the vocalist was doing with something equally as valid as the context of the song and the music. That's when I said, I'm going to put it all together in a stew and mix it up, and it's going to come out being me, but you're going to be able to remember it. I mean, that was my intentions anyway. I didn't know if I was going to be successful or not, but when I play a solo, you're going to be able to sing it. You're going to be able to remember it. And that all came from Brian May and how he put it together. That was huge for me. And the first time I was just out of college, and a friend of mine played Queen 2. It had 7 Seas of Rye on it, and I just went. That blew me away more than here in Boston for the first time, which was pretty amazing. But it was like, are you kidding me? And then, of course, I was a fan ever after that, especially with Night at the Opera and all the incredible.
It is incredible. What fantastic music we had back in the day.
Oh, exactly. And it was all unique. I mean, when people say, do you like the music today? It's not as good as the music before. I said, I don't know if that's accurate or not. It's just that the diversity was so much greater back in the 60s or 70s or even 80s. You could say, oh, that's Foreigner. Oh, that's Kansas. Oh, that's Journey, or that's, whatever the bands or whoever the bands were, they all had a distinct style. And I said, the only thing I could say is that because of the industry, maybe music has become a bit homogenized because there's somebody that becomes a flavor of the month, and everybody tries to do that. I don't know, just an opinion, but yeah, we had some good music back then for sure.
Yeah, we had some fantastic music, which brings me to my next question that I always like to ask everyone when we first speak to them. And I'd love to, after all that we've spoken about, I'd love to hear your answer to this question. If you could have been a fly on the wall for the creation of any great album of the past, what would you love to have been on the wall in the studio, hearing being put together?
Oh, gosh. Not fair. This is not fair. Let me unscroll the list. Well, for one, what I just talked about, Night at the Opera. I would have loved to see how that went together, the creative process and the engineering process of it. I'll give you 3. That's one. The Axis, the second Hendrix record, Old as Love.
Yeah.
Actually, I would have liked to have been a fly just when he did Little Wing. I've spent a lot of time, as many guitarists do, trying to play that correctly, and I realized that was just off his head one time, because I've heard him play it on YouTube and whatever other times, completely different. Same song, but just an extension of the paintbrush coming from the guitar neck. He was just brilliant, and of course you'd have to say, because I've read so much about it, and there's so many great documentaries, Sgt. Pepper. Just to see again the process. Not necessarily my favorite records of all time, even though they rank right up there. But just the curiosity of how they did it.
Yeah. I think the sheer hard work as well. I mean, technology's come a long way since then, but those two albums for me are two of the most groundbreaking albums. Sgt. Pepper, what they did sonically, and also the Queen album as well, Night of the Opera. It was just pushing the boundaries for what I guess you could do with tape in those days.
Well, and you're absolutely right. I've talked to Rodney Mills, who was our producer, engineer for many records, but starting with the Rockin' in the Night album. We've talked about the old days, just reminiscing. And we talk about what we did and things that we did when we had no automation, and we're doing a mix, and there's three of us, arms across the console, crossed over, remembering our cues for a pan or a push the volume up, the fader up a bit, and editing 2-inch tape with a razor blade. It was state of the art at the time. You didn't know any different, but now, you got Pro Tools and all the other whatever else, and as many tracks as you want, which I think can somehow be pretty dangerous. You just, the old expression, you never finish a record, you just quit. So you could get into it, but it was for the same reason that before you had little portable recording devices to bring a demo into rehearsal for the band. Before you had any of that, you had an idea, a riff or whatever, and you'd go to rehearsal and go, "What you got?" "Well, I got this thing. It goes like this," and all of a sudden the band would jump in, and you would develop ensemble the music, the magic, which made no other collection of members, 5, 6 members of whatever in a band could do that. May not be the greatest players in the world, but the chemistry, of A plus B plus C plus D equals something. And if you change any of those variables, it's going to change. So that was magical to see how everybody put their interpretation of one person's idea and create a song out of it. When you started bringing ideas and say, "Oh, I just got back from Chicago, wrote this song with somebody, and this is just a rough demo." And then, but the bass player hears doom 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 doom, or something. Well, that's all he can hear. Then he can't. It's hard to get away from it. So it becomes a little predictable.
Yeah, that's the magic, though, isn't it? I mean, it's having people in the same room. That's. I think that's what modern music's lacking in a way for me. It's that spark of creativity. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said it's fantastic to share files and share ideas across the internet, but there's something really magical about getting in the same room as the rest of the guys, and everyone getting to put their own spin on that idea.
I couldn't agree more. And that's it. The eye contact is, tells you so much about where somebody's going with something, even in a simple jam. And I know that it was, and to this day, it's like, oh, you can go online and you can have a guy in Seattle and you can be recording in Atlanta with him and whatever. It's like, it's the expression, Hank never done it that way. And it's that technology is wonderful, but it's just got to be in the room. You got to feel. And also that, when I did solos, I would do it in the control room, sitting right next to the producer, so that you could have that instant communications and dialogue, as opposed to, headphones and talk back and just kind of a distance. And that's only talking about 20 feet as opposed to 2 feet, but it makes a difference. And very much so with a band.
Yeah. I think you left 38 in, was it 94? When you left the band?
97.
97. Did you have anything that you like to have done that you never, any unfinished business with the band?
Well, I would have liked to have made another record with Don, because there was a departure in '87, and we did 2 records with extremely talented singer Max Carl, and we had quite a big hit with a ballad called "Heart Needs a Second Chance" that he
Nice.
sang,
Mm.
and he was a great talent, a great songwriter. Um, but again, it was just it was different, and I don't think our fans were ready to embrace it, and we were probably trying too hard to be something different at the time. Whatever the case is, when Don returned to the band, I wanted to do another record together, and we started writing a bit. But at that point in time, and even to this day, I think, it was a good long run, but maybe the magic's gone, and it's hard to it would be hard to recapture it. Who knows? I'll always wonder, and I would have liked to have had that opportunity to do one more record with the band as it was, but not to be.
Yeah, I mean, some fantastic records. It's certainly hearing the albums again. I was hoping for some bonus tracks and things like that. It would have been lovely to see that. Do those things exist? Were you a band that had loads of songs that didn't make the cut? Or
Well, there were always songs that didn't make the cut, and back then, that usually happened because you could only load so much information on a vinyl record. The grooves would get thinner or narrower and narrower, and the needle would jump, or you wouldn't get much volume. So there was what was it, usually 36 minutes of music, I think?
Yeah, 36, 38, yes.
Yeah. And so that was usually the reason, well, we can't have that many songs, so which one doesn't make the grade, and then you vote somebody off the island. And that's what happened. So yeah, there are outtakes. The problem, unfortunately, is because of the massive fire that the Universal
caught up in that.
So those are probably, unless they've been, now obviously we still have Wild Eyed Southern Boys and that because they've been digitized. And fortunately, because there were actually tapes, especially a lot of jazz from the 30s, that they didn't take priority in digitization, and they're gone forever. At least we have the music. The only thing is, if you wanted to go back and remix them or add stuff to them, it'd be pretty difficult. But whether those outtakes or the songs that didn't make it, and whether those were digitized as well, I have no idea. They may have just been on reels of tape that are now gone.
Yeah. And I've just got one final question to ask you. I could talk about music all day with you. It sounds like we,
where to find
we love a lot of the same sort of stuff. And the interesting thing about your Paul Rodgers story is that was one of the 2 albums I took to him to sign as well. Tons of Sobs. So I took tons of Sobs. Yeah, I took tons of Sobs, and I took. I think he was running with a pack or something. It was one of the Bad Company ones anyway. So, but it's just an interesting coincidence. So we always leave the easiest question to last. What is the meaning of life?
Makes me want to sing a song. Where's Eric Idle? Here he is. Well, every time I think of the meaning, what is the meaning of life? All I can think of is blessed are the cheesemakers.
Got the same sense of humor as well. Fantastic bit of Python. It's interesting times we're living through at the moment, but listening to these reissues has just reminded me what a fantastic band 38 Special are.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the music. And yeah, Hold On Loosely was the song for me that just took my attention. In a record store one day, someone was playing it. And as I said, one of the first albums I actually bought with my own money. It's, It's wonderful to speak to you. What, 30 years maybe later? So
yeah, no, it's serendipitous.
yeah,
that
thanks.
here we
Thanks
are.
so much for your time, Jeff. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Pleasure, Mark.